The way a human being finds things is very different from the way AI finds things. That is going to cause us to reinvent the internet as we know it. Each one of us will have one or multiple personal agents. We're seeing the shift from co-pilots which assist a human to an autonomous agent that for a certain class of tasks can replace a human. Every startup in the AI application space has to first and foremost internalize that their vendor is also their competitor. And that's a hard place to be. And your competitor is not GPT-5, your competitor is GPT-7. So you've got to really ask yourself, what am I going to do that GPT-7 will not be able to do?
Hi folks, Siddharth Aluwalia this side, your host at Neon Show and managing partner at Neon Fund, a fund that invests in the best of enterprise AI companies, building between the US-India corridor. I have today with me Ashu Garg, general partner at Foundation Capital. Ashu, I'm privileged to host you twice on the Neon Show, once 5 years ago, that was online almost.
Yes.
Yes, and today, we are sitting in Bay Area in your home.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited and thank you for coming to my house.
No, it's a real pleasure, and I want to dive straight into, what we want to discuss. You have been putting out a lot of amazing LinkedIn content and also on the Foundation Capital, website, right? So I want my conversation today to be structured around that because, what I see is your bullishness on AI and where is it going, right, is amazing, right? I learn a lot from it and I want
Thank you.
My audience also to learn from it. So my first, where I want to start is, you have mentioned that reasoning and reinforcement learning, combined is a new recipe for AI apps, right? And the new kind of products and services that are becoming possible with shift from RAG to reasoning plus reinforcement learning, is the new paradigm, right? Tell us more about that, and tell us, what these terms mean.
Yeah. So if you look at the history of recent AI, we can go back. AI has been around in some shape or form for many decades. But if you look at recent AI, 2.5 years ago, a little over 2.5 years ago, when ChatGPT launched, the idea of a conversational interface was innovative. It was a game-changing paradigm. And the first wave of software companies that you saw were essentially variations of that conversational interface. You can ask a query and it gives you a response. We saw that in customer service, we saw that in legal, we saw that in a bunch of verticals. But if you fast forward today, three things are going on. First and foremost, the underlying model providers are your biggest competitor. I think code generation is the most obvious example. We're seeing that in code generation. I think we will see that increasingly in other categories. Code generation that's happened. Content creation, if you go back in time, look at companies like Writer, Jasper, and 100 others in the same category, they're essentially sort of a wrapper on top of the underlying models. Now the models do everything. You can get, models have memory, the models can ingest tone, the models can write blog posts for you. So I think we're seeing the first coming back, the three things going in the market is we're seeing the water level rise because the underlying models themselves are competing with the downstream application companies. The second thing is we've seen agents be the rage over the last 12 months. Like everything is an agent. Agents, swarms of agents, systems of agents. And agents are simply a way for us to connect individual instances of a query and stitch them together to replace a complex workflow. So something as simple as, take a very simple agent, ridiculously simple customer service. You ask for a refund. That refund request you might make on let's say an Amazon website, in turn is going to trigger 5, 6, 7 to 10 actions. They've got to check, did you buy the product? When did you buy the product? Did you provide feedback? Was it delivered? They have some workflow that some human being was going through. Each of those steps has to be stitched together. But those workflows are dynamic in the case of a human. And so those agents are then applying reasoning, and the output of every step then influences what the next step is. That's why reasoning is like the notion. Agents is the visible part. Under the hood, you need reasoning for agents. More broadly, we're seeing, ChatGPT itself offer deep research and a variety of sort of more complex capabilities. Those capabilities require sequential reasoning. And so that's where reasoning comes in. The third, what we are seeing with reinforcement learning, is the importance of post-training. These models themselves, you need to ground them in certain data. You need to sort of incorporate the fact that if you're going to go through very complex workflows, they need more specialized knowledge and information around that workflow. And that really comes from the post-training, and that really the underlying technical technology is reinforcement learning. So those are the three big things going on in the space from a technology standpoint.
And what has, you have mentioned in your post that in this third wave that we are talking about, reinforcement learning has emerged as the core ingredient for building models and applications where AI acts as an autonomous worker. We are not talking about automation. We are talking about autonomous, which is like huge leap, from just building workflows now to AI imagining workflows. And I'm hoping that, now what we are talking about is new workflows that human had never imagined. AI will start doing also that, right? And this is a shift from the co-pilot which everybody was talking about 12 months ago, right? So what is going on here?
Yeah, so I think, if you step away from the technology, reasoning and reinforcement learning are the technical innovations. And reinforcement learning is interesting because reinforcement learning predates transformer models. So it's the coming back of the reinforcement learning that has been fun for people who've been in the space. But if you step away from the technology, ultimately what is going on is we're seeing the shift from co-pilots which assist a human to an autonomous agent that for a certain class of tasks can replace a human. This is not AGI. I mean, there's all these fancy words, AGI, ASI, whatever those are in the future, time will tell. But what these autonomous agents are able to do is they're able to do what Waymo does for driving for some other task. So think of Waymo. I think Waymo is a great example of an autonomous agent. And under the hood, there are a series of agents, and Waymo actually does a lot of reinforcement learning under the hood.
And, the other thing that I want to touch upon is we touched upon the third wave, right? And all these waves happened very quickly. I have never seen, or nobody has ever seen, technological
the speed of change.
The speed of change, right?
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about agentic web, where new product opportunities in a world where AI agents are, as you mentioned, automating complex business workflows, but they are also like platforms or operating systems now getting developed, for these agents, and there are new security, privacy, governance written for the entire agentic web. So now we were talking about earlier web, which was basically dominated by Chrome, right? And now we are stepping into, with Perplexity launching their own browser, agentic browser, and agentic web. What does it mean to you?
Look, ultimately, there are multiple things going on here. First and foremost, the world we are headed to is each one of us will have one or multiple personal agents. So today you're asking me the questions. I could imagine a world 5 years from now, where your agent is actually conducting the interview, and who knows, maybe my agent is answering the questions. But jokes aside, agents are increasingly representing individual humans in certain contexts. Today, those contexts are narrow. It's not general purpose. Over time, those contexts will get broader. In a world where you have agents acting on behalf of humans, the underlying infrastructure of the web has to change. Take a browser and take websites. Websites have been optimized for the last 25 to 40 years. I mean, some websites go back 40 years, but most websites are 25, 30 years old. These websites have been optimized to make it easy for human beings to find things. But the way a human being finds things is very different from the way AI finds things. And so if you are optimizing, if you're starting from scratch, you took any website, take Amazon.com and said, hey, I'm going to completely reimagine this website to make it easy for an agent to find something, that would look very different. So I think we're going to see changes in the UX. Now, websites are manifested through a browser. And so everyone who's trying Perplexity and others are saying, okay, how can I come up with a new browser that then gives me an unfair advantage in this flow? But the same is true for payment systems. If you look at current payment systems, if you look at Stripe and all of Stripe's fraud analytics and fraud systems, they're designed to test for a human being and is there human fraud happening. But imagine if now there's no human being, if Ashu Garg is not doing a transaction, Ashu has 25 different agents. These agents don't have their own identity today.
Yeah.
They don't have their own credit card. They're using my credit card, my identity, but they're behaving in ways that are similar to me, but not the same as me. So that creates its own challenge. That notion of, so now payment system, fraud analytics will have to change. Fraud, think of how you pay for transactions. You might say, okay, I'm going to tell my agent that it's okay to buy a plane ticket whenever the price drops 5%. So I can set that. But 5% from what? Am I willing to let the agent make a $1,000 decision, a $5,000 decision, a $50,000 decision? So agents, when they start making decisions on behalf of a human, ultimately someone's wallet is involved.
Yeah.
So you now have to put some guardrails around the agent behavior. Those guardrails require some system. Then now this agent is in turn, let's say they're starting to do microtransactions. So let's say you have an agent that is using small amounts of compute. Are you going to pay for those microtransactions with the credit card, or should you be paying for those microtransactions with the cryptocurrency? The challenge is credit cards have a minimum.
Yeah.
There's a typically 25 to 30 cent minimum transaction fee. If you buy something for $5, 25 cents is not that much. But if you buy something for $1,
yeah, you're shedding 25%.
Yeah, the transaction fee becomes. So in a world of micropayments, which is more common with agents, like you and I don't want to spend time doing. I took a $1. Maybe let's say the transaction is only 1 cent.
Yeah.
Now you have a 25x markup on your 1 cent transaction. So in a world where the cost of the activity comes to close to zero because an agent is doing the activity, the infrastructure to enable the activity will all have to change. So I think that's what's underway today. And that is going to cause us to reinvent the internet as we know it. I mean, there are so many aspects of the internet that are optimized for human activity. And if you started to optimize them for an agent, you would think about the world differently.
Are you using any agents which are autonomous right now for yourself?
I experiment with a lot of things. I have agents that, look at my email. I have agents that read my email. I have agents that help me, prepare for meetings. So I'm trying a lot of things. Autonomy is a very, broad term. Am I comfortable today letting an agent respond to an email on my behalf? The answer is no. But that's also a function of the fact that, my work emails have value. It's like, if I told a founder the agent by mistake said, yeah, we're ready to sign a term sheet, that would be problematic. Yeah. But there are, the value you place on emails is different for different people. So I think people will start using agents to respond to emails sooner than I would.
And have you been ever so excited about what's happening in the ecosystem as of today?
The last time I was this excited was in the late 90s. Like I have very vivid memories of 97, 98. I saw the world, in the fall of 96, I was working with McKinsey in Hong Kong, and I remember dialing in into private servers to be able to download data. Data pipelines existed. I would need to do work. I was working with a client in China, and I would log into some system in the US, and we'd be in a dial-up connection for 4 hours. I'd get a $2,000 dial-up bill, and I would download 5 analyst reports. By 97, I could do that on the internet.
Yeah.
And that transformation was magical. In 96, if I was traveling, I remember going from Bombay to Beijing in December of 96. There was no weather.com that I had access to. I left Bombay, and Bombay, even in December, is pretty warm. I showed up in Beijing in December, and it was snowing, and I was in my shorts and my chappals. So, not great weather for shorts and chappals. Weather.com changed that. By the late 90s, I was starting to use, Amazon. The idea that I could literally, think of something, order it on the internet, it would show up at my house 3 days later, was magical. Today, we take all of those things for granted.
Yeah.
So I think the transformation today is as dramatic as the transformation of the internet. Nothing in the last 25 years has come close.
And what about, you know, accountability now? Like if Siddharth's agent commits something which Siddharth never gave permission to, right? Who is accountable then?
Ultimately, Siddharth's agent. Siddharth is accountable. But you're raising a great point.
Yeah.
That's part of why whole new infrastructure on how these agents are managed, how you set guardrails becomes important. Maybe you said it was okay for the agent to spend $5, but you may not want the agent to spend $50,000. If you give the agent a credit card, you have a high limit, then if it makes a mistake, who's responsible? If you give it a debit card, well, then depends on how much your bank account has. So I think all of these things will have to get worked through. We're very early in this journey, and I think of this as roughly 1997 in the internet. Things are moving very quickly. I anticipate that over the next 5 years, we will see the same level of progress that we saw over a decade in the internet, because we are right. Each wave rides on the prior wave, and I think it's especially exciting how quickly these benefits will become global. If you think about the internet was predominantly a US phenomenon till the 2010s. I mean, internet, if you take India as an example, internet existed. I mean, I set up an ISP in India in 99, but as a matter of actual mass consumption, the internet is a 2010, 2012 phenomenon in India, roughly 15 years after the US. Today, you're seeing that ChatGPT consumption in India is actually simultaneously with the US. I think there is as much consumption, perhaps more.
Like Sam Altman and Arvind from Perplexity are more excited because the data.
No one's paying for the tokens. That's the problem, but that's it. But yes, they're collecting a lot of data. But certainly, we're seeing very similar usage patterns without the time shifting that we saw on the internet.
And who do you think, in this wave has the advantage? Is it second-time founders? Is it first-time founders? What mindset is required to ride this wave?
I think in the AI wave, in some ways similar to the internet, because the transformation is as disruptive. I think the founders that approach it with the naivety of a first-time founder and the curiosity of a first-time founder and the intensity of effort of a first-time founder, I think are most likely to succeed. Now, I don't think that doesn't mean second-time founders can't be successful, but what I tell, I work with a lot of IITians and IIT Build at Foundation, and I had this conversation with them yesterday. I said, just remember that your competition is some guy that works 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you can't compete at that intensity level, you have a problem. Your competition has no baggage of the past. They don't know how marketing was done in the past, and so they're going to do it afresh. Your knowledge of how marketing was done 10 years ago has some strengths, but also has a lot of baggage. So how do you strip away the baggage of the past is a challenge for repeat entrepreneurs. So I don't think you can make generalizations, but certainly I think the value of experience has diminished and the value of intensity and curiosity has exploded.
And what about geographical location?
On one hand, I think the internet and now AI is leveling the playing field. I talk to entrepreneurs in India, and very often they're using the same buzzwords, the same language, and have the same context on technology, for example, as an entrepreneur sitting in Silicon Valley. At the same time, I do think that there is an incredible amount of value to being in the right locations and communities. If anything, even in a world of AI, human connection doesn't go away. Human connection matters. And I think what Silicon Valley offers is, for one thing, if you're trying to build a tech, there are many other things that Silicon Valley sucks at. But if you're trying to build a technology company and your ambition is to build the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Microsoft, I think the human support system that is available here is the best on the planet. Like, there's nothing else comes close. Maybe in a decade, maybe in two. I think Bangalore is an interesting ecosystem. I think in a decade or two, I think Bangalore, has a shot at being there. And that's not to say great companies can't be built in Bangalore. Great companies will be built in Bangalore, will be built in Seattle, will be built in Austin, will be built in New York. But your odds are higher if you build it in Silicon Valley.
And right now the question today is, whose AI-driven ecosystem will become users' default? Right. What are your views as this economy is evolving?
If I could answer that question, I will retire. I don't think there will be a default AI system. I do think that for different use cases, you will see different winners. Definitely for the horizontal consumer or prosumer use case, think of ChatGPT as that. There is definitely, a battle royale between OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic today. And there is no doubt in my mind that Microsoft and Facebook, Meta that is, will be in that battle. So I think there are 5 players.
Would you count Perplexity in that battle right now?
At that abstraction, I would not count Perplexity, to be honest. I think in the battle for truly owning the consumer interface, ultimately, those are the 5 players that are investing in the underlying model technology as well.
Yeah.
In varying degrees. Microsoft is piggybacking on ChatGPT. I think Perplexity has a shot at that. So I wouldn't rule it out. I think Arvind has done a remarkable job. I think I am blown away by what he has accomplished. And I think he has put a stake in the ground. I think he has a shot. But to be fair, I don't think it's in the same zip code. I think Apple will want to play in that game, maybe with Perplexity.
Yeah.
But really, when you think about the players today, I think the 3 contenders today are really Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI. And I think Microsoft and Meta are sort of fast followers. And Apple is the dark horse.
The other question I have is, you have mentioned this, that it's no longer about the model quality. It's about who offers the best end-to-end experience for consumers, for enterprises, and for developers.
So again, to be fair, I do think model quality matters. I think the rate of change in pure model performance has slowed down. And so today, the diff between one model and another is less than it was 2-3 years ago. And over time, I think we will see that rate of change slow down even more. I also think that open source has demonstrated that while it can't compete with the SOTA models, it's only 6 to 12 months away. I think where value is getting captured increasingly, and you see that in the way OpenAI has pivoted the company in the last 12 months.
What do you mean pivoting the company?
I mean, OpenAI was primarily a model provider.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, when it was launched 2.5 years ago, was meant to be a test bed for the model as a way for them to collect training data. I mean, today, the most important thing about OpenAI is ChatGPT. They've gone really deep in coding, and they want to really make a bet on coding. With their agent systems, they're really going after applications more broadly. So OpenAI has pivoted from being a developer-focused company to being a consumer and prosumer-focused applications company. You can call it a pivot, you can call it an evolution, but it's a pretty dramatic change in the span of the last 12 to 18 months. And I think the reason people are going in that direction is ultimately consumers or enterprises want to problem solve. They're looking for solutions to problems, and they're willing to pay, because of the nature of these solutions, they're willing to pay real money. I mean, we're seeing, I have a startup that's barely 6 months off the ground. They're about to sign what might be a $30 million deal.
Wow.
First deal they're going to sign.
How did they pass the procurement?
Because they were able to demonstrate to the customer that the alternative to using them was to spend $80 to $100 million with Accenture. So $30 million seems like a lot of money, but relative to spending $80 to $100 million, that's not that much money. And so we're starting to see customers pay very large amounts of money for outcomes. But then in order to be able to deliver an outcome, you have to have more control end to end.
So you are saying at one point of area, there are these 5 large companies, that are dominating the agentic era as we speak, as we are entering into an agentic era. I will not call it an internet anymore, right? So where's the opportunity for startups? You have mentioned there are some, startups where verticals have advantages, right?
Look, I think there's infinite opportunity for startups. If you think about things that human beings do, the vast majority of things require specialized knowledge, access to specialized systems, and the ability to deeply integrate into complex, high-value workflows. And that's, I think, where startups will win. We have a company in our portfolio, Tenor, that does the front office patient intake processes for specialty medical service providers. Think dialysis clinics, sleep apnea, a variety of psychiatry centers, so on and so forth. You get a patient that's referred to you. You have to go through a patient referral process. You then have to contact the patient to schedule. In parallel, you have to reach out to get their insurance information, reach out to the insurance company, get a prior auth. Once the actual first meeting happens, you have to then submit a claim. You might provide the person a prescription. That prescription may require further justification. Let's say it's a prescription for a CPAP machine. Insurance is just not going to say yes. They're going to ask for a lot of documentation. They may ask for some follow-up studies. That entire process is automated by a company like Tenor. I have a company called Reggie, which is completely automating the front end of prospecting. You have SDRs. SDRs are pulling data from a ZoomInfo or a Clay. They are then figuring out, based on that data and existing data, who should I follow up with? What messaging should I send? When those people, respond to those emails and you have to follow up, all the way to the point where it becomes a meeting that has to be scheduled for a sales rep. That process can have hundreds of steps, and in some ways, an iterative cycle over months. That process gets automated by Reggie. Will people pay a lot of money for it? Yeah, absolutely. But Reggie has to demonstrate that you're delivering business value, that if you're saving them $1 million of cost, you can get a couple of $100,000. But you have to demonstrate you're saving $1 million, or you're creating $1 million of new pipeline, or whatever that metric might be.
So you're saying it's in the specialized and complex workflows that startups have to tap in. But then the question there is, all these companies, all the startups are built on top of these model companies, right? And these models are also learning what are the workflows that these startups are doing. And we have seen in the past, right? For example, with what happened with Windsurf, right? And there are more examples that these model companies are now launching their own vertical applications.
Absolutely. So look, that's it's a full circle to where we started off 30 minutes ago, which is every startup in the AI application space, every service as software startup has to first and foremost internalize that their vendor is also their competitor. The model provider is both vendor and competitor, and that's a hard place to be. And they are actually educating their vendor on how to compete with them. That's the inherent challenge. And so if you recognize that challenge up front, then you have to start thinking about what is the data that you're not going to send to the model provider. What is the data for which you're going to use an open source model versus a closed source model? What is the role of reinforcement learning in sort of post-training of a model for a customer-specific situation? So for example, I have a company called Player Zero, and while they do use GPT-5 and other proprietary models, the core code base of the company for their customers, what Player Zero does is it helps you debug problems in your code, and it actually simulates a pull request so you can proactively identify likely problems. For both of those, they're using reinforcement learning extensively, so they build a graph of your code. That graph of your code they don't share, because no one wants their code to go to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like, that's proprietary information for a customer. So they build a proprietary graph, customer by customer, and they may use ChatGPT or GPT-5 or 4 to, query the graph, but they don't actually expose the graph itself to OpenAI. Secondly, they're doing a whole bunch of post-training of the models to get better performance for specific use cases. So, one of the things, if I'll connect this back to sort of where we started off, we're seeing an explosion of entrepreneurs, and even the coding has gotten commoditized. Technical skills have not. So in some ways, the founders today that I see being successful are more technical than the founders in the SaaS wave, which also means that repeat entrepreneurs who grew up in a less technical world are struggling with the technical complexity. They're struggling with the pace of change on technology.
Does this also mean that if you have distribution muscles in the SaaS era, they're not valid in the agentic era?
Life is never black and white, so I wouldn't say that it's not valid, but I definitely think that the power of distribution in SaaS does not apply one-to-one in the agentic era.
Can you share an example why?
Look at Salesforce. Incredible distribution machine. It's the best B2B sales and distribution machine that has been created in the last 25, 30 years. Look at how their agentic, Agent Force, Agent Einstein, Agent whatever, Agent Salesforce. I don't think our product is doing that well.
But who is eating their lunch right now?
I think there's dozens of companies. Look, today, change takes time. I think there are dozens of companies that are poised to eat Salesforce's lunch. But those companies, despite the distribution disadvantage, are positioning themselves to do so. Now, could Salesforce buy a few of them? Could Salesforce reinvent? Nothing, I won't rule it out. I don't think we should ever assume that the value of distribution is zero. I just think in a world where disruption is rapid, distribution alone is not sufficient. Product innovation becomes far more important.
So are you working as hard as you were working in 97 right now?
I don't think I could work as hard as I was working in 97. And that's my challenge. I think about that a lot. 97, I was in my mid-20s and, I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now I have 2 kids and, my body is not as strong as it was in 97. And so I have to work smarter, but I also have to work hard. I think this is a time that as an entrepreneur, you have to recognize that you're competing on sheer intensity, on your curiosity, on your intellect, and not just on your experience.
But one thing my listeners and I have, right, that access to enterprises are not easy for young entrepreneurs, right? So how much does relationship matter, right? Gray hair matter in entering?
See, look, again, things aren't binary.
Yeah.
Does experience matter? Absolutely. Do relationships matter? Absolutely. If anything, relationships matter more today because people are putting more at risk. If you're going to a company and saying, I'm going to outsource this process for you, that's pretty scary for them too. Yeah. So if they're going to do something that's scary for them, they want to do it with someone they trust. So human connection and skills that come with human connection matter, and those skills compound over time. Relationships are compounding assets. And so someone in their 40s or 50s has value over someone who has no relationships at all. And, I'm very lucky that in venture, if you compound correctly, you can continue to compound for a very long time. I think the same thing can be true for entrepreneurs. And absolutely experienced entrepreneurs have that benefit. What they have to balance those relationships with is, can they dance at the pace at which the technology is changing? Ultimately, the pace of change is such that their product has to change at that pace. And many entrepreneurs are doing it, many very experienced. I'm an investor in many second, third time founders. I just came out of, my last meeting was with Mohit Aaron, who's starting a new company, going after, sales tech, Sci-Fin, and this is his third company. And Mohit's had 2 decacorns, and, this will be his third. And he's working at an intensity that any young person would be hard pressed to match. But he's choosing to do that. And I'm just saying that all experienced founders will have to choose to execute at that intensity level.
You talk about, for building durable AI startups today, focus on domains where you can control the most valuable data and feedback loops. What do you mean by that?
See, it comes back to your comment a few minutes ago that your competitor is the model provider, who's your vendor. And your competitor is not GPT-5, your competitor is GPT-7. If you cannot have a product that can compete with GPT-7, you're dead on arrival, because you want to spend the next 5 years losing money to the point that you can have a profitable business 5 years from now and you'll be competing with GPT-7. So you've got to really ask yourself, what am I going to do that GPT-7 will not be able to do?
But I don't know the roadmap of.
So I think you have to take a guess. I think that's what makes this hard. That's what's going to separate winners from losers, is you have to really get into the weeds and say, what is going on at the OpenAIs of the world? What are the SOTA labs doing? What kind of post-training work are they doing? How are they incorporating RL in there? What kind of data sets are they accessing? So what can I assume they will do so I can take advantage? But also, what do I need to do on top of that? And that's where getting into high-value workflows, proprietary data sets, fine-tuning and post-training as sources of advantage will become important.
So right now, what we observe, right, in the market, people like Mark Zuckerberg, they are not placing advantages on companies. They are placing advantages or placing their bets on people, acquiring the best of people for hundreds of millions of dollars. Why is that happening? Like, is proprietorship or IP not of any value?
IP absolutely is of value, and entrepreneurship is absolutely of value. I think there are two different trends going on simultaneously, which we often conflate with each other. First and foremost, the 4 or 5 large platform companies are all facing some level of antitrust.
What is that?
So antitrust in the US is, when the Department of Justice, DOJ, has to approve an acquisition or is investigating you for certain trade practices, which they might deem to be monopolistic, or they might deem to be might harm the interests of consumers. So over the last 5 years, there's a lot of antitrust activity underway. Acquisitions are taking many, many months, sometimes as many as 18 months to get approved. So in a world where everything, you go from GPT-4 to GPT-5 in a little more than 18 months, if you acquire a company and it's not going to get acquired for 18 months, you're dead on arrival. How do you make acquisition decisions? So because of the antitrust issues, companies are choosing to, lift out teams, including the IP. But the bet they're making is the IP is changing so rapidly. You take a licensed copy of the IP, you leave a copy behind, and that team, when you acquire the team along with the licensed copy, in 18 months, the existing copy will not be of any value. And so it's just a new structure for what is effectively an acquisition. So that's one thing that's going on. The second thing is going on is that the value captured by talent in large companies has exploded. And why is that? Because if you take Meta as the example, which is just been throwing away, seemingly throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars at people. Look, Meta will spend well north of 50 billion, I think some number between 50 and 70 billion dollars on the underlying data set, on GPUs, essentially. So if you're going to spend $50 billion on GPUs, don't you want to spend 5% of that or 10% of that, making sure those GPUs are doing the right things?
Yeah.
So because of the scale of CapEx, the willingness to spend a portion of that on the 100 people that matter, that will maximize the value of that CapEx, that numbers have exploded. And so today it's rational. If you're spending $50 billion on GPU, that you'd be willing to spend $5 billion on assembling the team. And ultimately, the set of people that can do these things are not infinite. Some people will say there's 100 people that matter in AI. Technically, some people will argue it's 1,000. But that number is between 100 and 1,000. It's not 10,000.
And why are these skills not transferable or repeatable?
The skills are transferable and repeatable, but they diffuse with time. These are not, because of the pace of change, this stuff is not being taught in a college course. You can't go learn how to fine-tune a model. You can't go learn how to train a model. Because frankly, OpenAI doesn't know. Like, if you were to talk to the bleeding edge teams at OpenAI and say, what are you going to do 6 months from now? The answer is they don't know. And we live, Turing, we work with all of the large model providers, all the soda labs, on a variety of data and post-training services to help them sort of improve the models. And their challenge and our challenge as their partner is they don't know what they will need from us in 6 months. So we're both guessing where the future is headed. And so the only people that can actually have those skills in the near term are the people who are in the mix. If someone went to sleep for 6 months and woke up again, they would be like, oh my God, the world has changed around me. The techniques are different, the tools are different. And unlike software, traditionally, these are not architectural innovations alone. The core architectural innovation of transformer models has been made, and there are other second order architectural decisions. So it's not that there are no architectural decisions, but a lot of the innovations feel more like recipe changes. You make some dal, and then how much salt you put and how much tarka you put. That's what separates the dal at dum cooked from the dal at this that someone else might make. But salt and tarka is not something that you can quantify necessarily. It's a black art in some ways.
So you're saying these 100 or 200 people that have been...
I would say 100 to 1,000. I think the number is closer to 1,000, sure. But say 1,000.
But let's say only 1,000 people who have been working at the cutting edge or bleeding edge of AI in the last 5 years, know these black arts. This is very hard for them startups because they'll never be able to attract either one of these folks start a company. But what's in these folks for start a company when they're already making $100 million?
Some people want to make more than 100 million. 100 million is the starting point to do something more interesting. So I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs who could make 100 who are choosing to do those startups. But I go again, most startups are not and should not be innovating at the model layer. I think startups have to figure out, how do I innovate at the application layer in a way that I am future-proofing my business to innovation by the model layer. And so the people at the application layer are different. That's not the 1,000. When I say there's 1,000 people, those are the people that are really innovating at the model layer.
And right now, if you have to, this is the last part of the podcast, we have just 5 minutes left. If you have to summarize what you're looking for in entrepreneurs right now for the next maybe few months, because the world is changing so fast, I'll not ask you for the next 1 year.
Yeah. I think for me, what I look for an entrepreneur in some ways has actually stayed relatively consistent. I invest in people that have big dreams. So I look for ambition of scale. I'm looking to build decacorns and $100 billion companies. I'm looking to find my next Databricks. I think Databricks will be $1 trillion company one day. It's worth, order of magnitude 100 billion today. I'm looking for founders who have an aspiration to build the next Databricks. That's where it starts for me. Then I'm looking for founders who have the ability to build the next Databricks. Yeah. Aspiration is not enough. So what does it mean to build the next Databricks? For me, most of those founders tend to be technical. They tend to have a technical insight. They tend to be AI native in that they understand what's going on in the ecosystem. In terms of personal characteristics, they have a level of intensity, a level of grit, a level of resilience, and an ability to learn and relearn that is, second to none. So those are the kinds of things I look for. I look for ambition. I look for skills, what I think of as capabilities, and then I look for a certain set of personal attributes around what kind of person are they and how will they react in difficult situations.
And in your view, right, in the last 5 years, how many such decacons have been created in the ecosystem that matter?
If I don't have the numbers of the cup. If you look backwards, my guess is there are many tens of decacorns that have been created. I mean, Databricks is not the only one. Obviously, OpenAI and Anthropic are huge success. They're all $100 billion plus, both $100 billion companies. I think there's, if I had to guess, there's a dozen, maybe a couple of dozen decacorns. To me, the more interesting question is not the past, it's the future. I think the number of decacorns is going to explode. I think many more decacorns will get created over the next decade than over the last decade.
And why do you think so?
Because of this innovation. See, whenever there is a disruption, whenever there is an inflection point around change, it creates opportunity. And I think this opportunity is to founders out there, I really do think there are almost unlimited opportunities to create new decacorns. But you have to find the right market, you have to find, the right use cases, and you have to have a clear sense of why you believe you can be a winner, and not a winner today, a winner against ChatGPT, a winner against GPT-7.
And currently the norm is, companies like Lovable are getting created, going to 100 mil ARR in 8 months. Are you seeing the same trend in your portfolio or companies near to you as well?
I wish I could say that every company I invest in gets to 100 million in 8 months. That is a 1 in 1,000 shot. We definitely have some incredible companies in our portfolio, but you don't see that kind of growth often. What we are seeing, and I talked about it earlier, is we are seeing customers willing to pay large amounts of money for output, and therefore we're seeing deal sizes that are much larger than we saw before. We're seeing consumers willing to pay for technology and willing to pay for AI, which historically consumers were less willing to pay for technology. Most technology was monetized through ads. We're seeing subscription models be much more successful today. So I definitely think the rate of revenue acceleration is exhilarating, and we're seeing some pretty exciting stuff. But still, the 0 to 100 in 8 months, I wish that happened more often.
But are you seeing in a large span of time also, like 2 to 3 years?
We are seeing much more rapid change. Absolutely, yes.
My observation has been, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the companies winning today or seem to be winning like 100 mil ARR today are more attacking the greenfield right now, which is building new use cases for prosumers or consumers like Lovable. OpenAI carved out new budgets for people as well as companies, right? So should founders attack the existing industries and try to replace ServiceNow, Salesforce, or should they focus more on the greenfield side?
I think the beauty of technology is that both are opportunities. If you look at code generation tools, where there has been the most 0 to 100, the fastest 0 to 100 ramp have been code generation tools. I think you could argue it both ways. You could argue that code generation is a new category because no one could generate code before. There was no Lovable before Lovable. Or you could argue that Lovable is, eating into categories like Wix and, other site creation tools. Because we've had traditional configuration type of tools that allowed you to do self-service website creation or self-service mobile app creation. Yeah. So what is greenfield versus brownfield itself is unclear in today's world with AI. But ultimately, I would say the fastest growing companies find a wedge in the market that is high value. They find a wedge where, in addition to being high value, the pain is acute enough that people are willing to take some risk and sign a check quickly. Now, sometimes those checks in the case of Lovable are relatively small, and you need many tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of customers to get to 100 million. And in other cases, the checks are large, and you have more of a traditional enterprise sale, and you can get to $100 million with 100 customers. I think both answers are possible, but they have different trade-offs.
And my last question today is this still possible to create companies like Scale AI? Like you have one Turing in your portfolio, but because the data sets today required are infinite.
Ultimately, we are living in a world where data is more important than code. And so the value of data will continue to grow. And once you internalize that, I think companies that help build, manage, scale data sets will have value. So absolutely, I think, data companies is going to be an important category, whether they have proprietary data or generate data, whether the data is customer specific or cross customer. There are many good flavors. That said, I think providing data to the SOTA labs is a very hard business. It's a great business, and Scale proved to be very successful. Turing has been very successful. There are a couple of other players, but it is not one for the faint of heart. You're going after an incredibly demanding customer, and you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do that none of these other players will be able to do? And so if you have something unique to bring to the party, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ashu. Great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the pod.
Yeah, amazing to have you again.
Thanks so much.